Wow, we're so happy to be here today. Thank you for everybody for coming to the Maple Leaf Mystery Conference. As Eric said, my name is Lynn. It's Lynn McPherson, and I myself am a cozy author, and I will be moderating this really fun panel tonight. So what I'm going to do, since we don't have a lot of time, is introduce our panelists first and then just jump right into some questions. So starting with Diane Bader. Can you wave, Diane? So Diane is a mom of 3, a book coach, and the author of over a dozen mystery novels and many works in progress. She has also hosted the Escape with a Writer blog to promote fellow authors and is a board member of Crime Writers of Canada. In her spare time, she works for a professional theater and has written her first play. So thank you, Diane.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ginger. Hi, Ginger.
In my hand. Hi.
So Ginger Bolton writes the Deputy Donut Mysteries, Coffee, Donuts, Cops, Danger, and One Curious Cat. As Ginger is Janet Boland, Ginger wrote the Threadville Mysteries, Murder and Mayhem in a Village of Crafty Shops. Ginger is owned by an overly dramatic rescue dog. That sounds like me.
He was just barking too.
Sharon, where's Sharon? There you are, Sharon. Hi there. Sharon A. Crawford, a former journalist, is the author of The Enemies Within Us, a memoir, which includes origins of her mystery writing habit. She writes the Beyond Mystery series, and with it, the main character, Dana Bowen, hosts Crime Beat Confidential on thatchannel.com, and Sharon also runs the East End Writers Group. And finally, Winona Kent, hello.
Hello.
Is an award-winning author of 4 popular musical mystery novels, a novella, and a short story featuring professional jazz guitarist and amateur sleuth Jason Davey. She's the BC rep for Crime Writers of Canada and an active member of Sisters of Crime Canada West. And Winona, can we update that? Because you're the vice chair now, aren't you?
I am, yes.
Okay, so congratulations.
2 hats.
Super. Okay, so before I start with the questions, I thought first I'd kind of just give a little bit of a definition as to what is the difference between a cozy mystery, the amateur sleuth, and a traditional mystery. And I found this really good definition on the Bookends Literary Agency blog. So I'm just gonna shoot that out, and then I'm gonna turn the questions on you guys. So cozy mysteries can best be defined by the word used to describe them. They are cozy and everything that word conjures in your mind. Think of warm tea, comfy chairs, cuddly pets, a soft, newly knitted blanket, and warm, freshly baked pastries. That's a cozy. When you read one, you feel like you're being embraced by a world you want to be in. A cozy is almost always an amateur sleuth, but an amateur sleuth isn't always cozy. And then, so that leads us to amateur sleuth, who is a regular citizen, non-professional detective who decides to find the real killer, which is, of course, the hallmark of any amateur sleuth. And finally, we have the traditional mysteries, which probably have the broadest definition. They can be amateur sleuths or official investigators. They can be a little darker or light and funny. What they aren't is suspense or cozy. They tend to fall somewhere in between. And typically an amateur sleuth who is not cozy will fall into the area of traditional mystery. And in a traditional mystery, you'll also see a faster pace and maybe a little more blood and guts, but nothing that would compare to what a suspense might offer. So my first question for you guys is, where do your books fall in? Cozy, amateur, sleuth, or traditional mystery? Diane, let's start with you.
I have 4 different series, and going by those definitions, I think I have 1 series in just about each one of those slots. Definitely the one that I just, my newest book out, The Con Lady, definitely fits more in the traditional mystery. But the one I'm working on for this fall, Dead Man's Doll, actually fits into a cozy. that totally sounds wrong, but it's very true.
They always have those great titles, don't they? Okay, Ginger, how about you?
Oh, definitely cozy.
Yes, absolutely. And some of the best titles.
Oh, yeah, we tend to have punny titles, and in order to achieve that, I usually start with the title. I don't want to write the book and then try to come up with a pun to go with it.
Do you have a favorite?
My favorite title, I think, Survival of the Fritters, which was the first one. I always go through my list and choose the favorite that's on my list, but I also laugh at Beyond a Reasonable Donut.
I love that. Okay, Sharon, how about you?
I think my Beyond Mystery series are sort of a little bit of everything in there. The cozy part, well, yes, there's a dog that sort of starts to make his home with the Bowman and Overture family, because there's a 7-year-old son in there. So yes, there is certainly some home stuff, but there's a lot of, I think there's what I would call traditional, because there's your plot has, the crime gets committed and you have your suspects and and the red herring and that, although it's not exactly done that straightforward, and they do come back to the home. We have other characters in there in some of the books who definitely pretend or try to be amateur sleuths. David has a crack at it, and there's a great Aunt Doris in Beyond Blood who's, well, let's put it this way, she thinks she's a female Sherlock Holmes at one point. So, so like I say, it's a real mix up or mix together. It's not just one thing.
Right. Super. And Winona, how about you?
Well, I never started out trying to fit into a certain subgenre. I just started out writing my Jason stories because I wanted to write about an amateur sleuth. So I'm one of those people whose stories don't consistently fit squarely into the rigid definitions of a genre. So my Jason stories are very definitely amateur sleuth, but underneath that heading, my novella Salty Dog Blues and my short story Blue Devil Blues are probably best described as cozies. Disturbing the Peace might fit into that definition, but also fits traditional mystery. And Notes on a Missing G-String is definitely not a cozy. It's not porn either. I think it's probably a very noir traditional mystery. And then my last two, Lost Time and Ticket to Ride, they slide back towards cozies, but never quite sit right inside the strict definition. So I'm thinking of inventing my own genre, musical sleuth.
It sounds fun.
Fully amateur, part cozy, part traditional. And I think it's kind of neat that my main character, Jason Davey, has a sister who writes under a pen name Taylor Feldspar. And she's the author of a very successful series of cozy mysteries about a caterer who solves murders. So I'm never far away from acknowledging the genre anyway.
Super. Oh, that's great. Okay. And now Ginger, your Deputy Donut series is a great example of a classic cozy, and it's one of my favorites. So where do you get your ideas?
Oh, as Rick Mafina said last night, everywhere. But the idea for the donut shop came from a friend, Lori Cass, who's a cozy author, happened to mention that there's a bakery in Michigan that was going out of business in a small town of Clare, Michigan, that had a police force of 9 people. The 9 policemen were so upset that it was going out of business that they bought it themselves. And this was quite a few years ago, and they've continued to run it. And so when I heard that, I thought, whoa, what a perfect place to talk to a lot of people, and many of them will be law enforcement. So great place for an amateur sleuth to get some clues.
Definitely. There's a question there. I'm not sure if we're supposed to be answering these as we go, but since it's there, we might as well. It says, I understand what makes them cozy, teacups and kittens, but how much sex and violence does it take to disqualify a crime novel as cozy? Who wants to answer that one?
Not going near it.
Would it be fair to say almost any?
Yeah, I'd say almost any. They're just, the sex is behind closed doors. and the blood and gore are, it's kind of, it's, there's murder. So obviously, people are going to picture what they're going to picture, but we don't write it out in explicit terms.
Right, right. Super. Okay. Now, Winona, you write the Jason Davy Mystery Series about a professional musician, which we've already talked about, and he solves mysteries in his spare time. What inspired the unique combination of musician and amateur sleuth?
I originally created Jason's character about 20 years ago, and he was a purser on a cruise ship in the Caribbean in a straightforward mystery. And the story evolved into a film script. It became my main project at film school. And then it evolved again into a slightly different novel. Jason became an entertainer on a cruise ship in Alaska, and the book was published as Coldplay in 2012. And he was inspired by a couple of people I'd met and knew, including a real entertainer on a real cruise ship I went on to Alaska. And after that, I wrote some time travel romances. And then a friend of mine in England suggested that I switch to mysteries and bring Jason back as an amateur sleuth. And I never even thought of him in those terms, but I decided to give it a try. And I wrote Disturbing the Peace in 2017 just to see if I could handle it. And I found out I loved writing mysteries, and I just carried on from there. And there aren't a lot of professional musicians who are also amateur sleuths in the crime novel world. And the other thing is that the inciting incident isn't ever a murder in my stories. Jason specializes in finding missing people and missing things. And that journey invariably leads to someone being killed in nearly every story, in fact. And by solving who's responsible for the murder, Jason also solves the main storyline.
Oh, that's so fun.
Yeah.
It's a great idea. Now, Diane, your latest book, The Conned Lady, is book 5 in the Wild Blue Mystery Series and your 13th novel with BWL Publishing. How do you keep the ideas flowing, and where do you draw inspiration?
The ideas always seem to flow when I'm either working on something else or trying not to work on something else. That's when they all pop up, and I've got notebooks on my shelf here going, okay, well, this is a future series. This is a future series. And it doesn't matter what I'm working on. It's always a bit of a struggle working on this one because the other ones are whispering. So.
So do you ever go back and forth, or do you generally stick one at a time?
If I don't have a deadline, I go back and forth. If I have a deadline, I have to sit down and go, okay, like my next book, the one I'm working on right now, comes out in October. So I've got to get finished with edits and everything and get her done.
Right.
Meanwhile, other books are tapping my shoulder. So.
Oh, that's great. Sharon, you've written novels, short stories, and even a memoir, The Enemies Within Us. Where do your stories come from?
They come from the one like Last Night Everywhere, but I think the mysteries, a lot of them come from having a sense of justice. Without going in a lot of detail, I didn't really have a very happy childhood, but and so I guess I feel that people need to get their justice. The bad guys got to get their just desserts. And the other thing was, okay, where did it all start? It's my mother's fault. She made me watch the old Perry Mason series in black and white on TV. I didn't tell her I liked it. And my dad had to take the radio downstairs to get his hockey game. So that sort of started it all. And then boring books from the library. It always seemed to end up being mystery books, except for, those teenage novels they had back in the 60s, some of those, but so I guess I get ideas from what I read, but also from what I see going on in the world. And I like to put some area of social justice, something that's going on in the world at the time of my novels, which are set in the late 1990s, and we're just getting into 2000 now. So there's an abduction in Beyond Blood, but there's also some other stuff going on with drugs and abortions and pregnancies and how things were handled in those days as opposed to now. And Beyond Blood, or Beyond Faith rather, the idea for that came partly from this nun that used to bully me in school. And I thought, what would happen if, because I never got this chance, but what would happen if the person, whether it was a nun or who wasn't, came back into your life, went into your professional life, and the one that gave you a hard time, how would you handle this? And this is what happens to Dana in there. They end up getting this nun who's loosely based on the one I grew up with. And she gave Dana a hard time, but not as bad as the one gave me a hard time. And how does Dana deal with it? How does the interaction go on? And a lot of the stories just sort of, the ideas sort of pop up as I go along.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. And I think you touched on something, the idea of the finding justice and things, wrapping up at the end. Does that appeal to all of you? Like, I always think, like, for me, when I'm reading a mystery, I love solving the puzzle and kind of like getting right into that. But always, like, I need to have that at the end. It's, for me, it's part of the joy, and seeing if I can get it before the end of the novel, which I usually can't. But does that ring true for you guys as well, or?
It
For me,
does for me, for sure. I'm always been a puzzle
Mhm.
addict. And I always love books that I can sit and read and not always know who done it at the end.
Yeah.
Those are the ones I go, oh, you got me. That's good.
Yeah.
That happens to me a lot while I'm writing. I think I know who done it at the end, and it turns out I don't. And I end up changing my mind about 3/4 of the way through. And then I have to go back to the story and weave in all the stuff that takes into account the changed ending.
Right. So you've changed that. I've done that once, and it felt, I don't know. I was so happy with it afterwards, but there was definitely a lot of checking, like, okay, is this gonna work? Is this gonna work?
Yeah.
Ginger, how about you?
As far as justice, yes, I think that's really important to have justice at the end. And I hope I do have people saying that they didn't guess it. And of course, there's always somebody that says I knew right away. And the other thing I like to do besides justice, I'm kind of evil. I tend to humiliate some of the bad people. They don't just fall, they fall in an embarrassing way.
Well, they always say, be careful. You should always be nice to a writer, or you might end up in their novel. Right?
I put my cousin into this last novel as one of the baddies.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
She's no longer speaking to me anyway, so it's okay.
Well, the nun in mine is dead, so now.
I had nuns too.
Come back.
Okay, so let's talk about the writing process here. There are two terms commonly used, the plotter and the pantser. So a plotter is someone who plans out their books, and a pantser writes from the seat of their pants. Now, Ginger, I remember just from listening to you previously, you are a plotter. Can you tell us about your process, how long your outline is, and how much time you spend before diving into actually writing your books?
Okay, I'm in that process right now with Deputy Donut number 8. So it takes, I've been taking a month to write an outline. I think this one's taking a little bit longer because I'm letting myself take longer. And it's not, and the outline, my wonderful editor said to me in the beginning, I'd like an outline and it can be 25 pages. I'm like, oh, good, because I had one at the time it was, I thought, way too long to send to an editor, and it wasn't. So that is, as Maureen Jennings said on Tuesday night, that saves a lot of time for me to have an outline already. Because now during this month, I'm rearranging scenes in my mind. I'm rearranging the timeline. I've already figured out who all the characters are and what their personalities are like. And then when I'll finally get this whole list of scenes and rearrange that, and then I'll turn it into not a 1A, 2B sort of outline. It's a narrative form that my editor can read as if it was a short story with, a lot of stuff crammed into it. So the outline will contain all of the main all of the suspects and the villain and the victim, and how my my character goes after the clues.
Right. And
And
so,
I don't even think of them as clues and red herrings anymore. I just think of them all as clues.
okay, that makes sense. So do you spend then almost as much time before you actually write the book,
Oh,
preparing for it?
Oh, no, I spend like a month preparing for it, and then I had the other 8 months writing it and and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting and editing and putting commas in and out.
Okay, makes sense. How about everybody else? Pantsers, plotters?
I'm a plotter.
You're a
I'm
plotter?
very definitely a plotter, and I spend a lot of time plotting out, doing an outline, just putting it all out there, and it ends up being changed anyway. It was the only way that I could work full time in an unrelated job and still keep my mind focused on the story I was writing and not get lost or distracted. And I learned how to do effective outlines when I was at film school. And it's the first thing they teach you, because you need to start with a treatment, and a treatment is just a detailed outline. And I found it worked so well with novels as well. And I revise as I go, so the end result is never what I started out with. And I've experimented with a few different plotting software programs as well. And I finally settled on Plotter, Plottr, because I'm a very visual person. But I spend endless hours plotting out the entire story, totally.
That's great. And so do you find, like, when you change it, is it like, what makes you change it? Is it a character that just doesn't seem to be going that direction? Or is it just, as you write it, you kind of think, okay, I think something needs to change a little bit?
Yeah, as I write it, I run up against things which don't work as well as I thought they'd work.
Right.
Or my characters start doing things that I never envisioned they'd do. Or I've left a question mark with something, and I finally fill in that question mark, and I think, oh God, I got to go back now and change all this stuff to make this work. It's a variety of things, but it's usually because the story has just gone off in a different direction than what I envisioned, and the different direction that it's gone in is so much better than what I originally thought out. So
Great. Now, so Diane, what aspect of a novel is the most challenging to write, in your opinion?
Sometimes the end. We were just talking about pantsers and plotters, and a lot of the times I'm more of a pantser. So I will just kind of write as scenes come and let the story flow and everything. And I do kind of have a general idea, and I will have my bad guy at the end. I will even write an ending. And then by the time I actually get to the ending, I'm like, it doesn't work. So I have to go back and change that, because either it seems too obvious, or I just don't like having that person as the bad guy.
Right. And will you go straight from beginning to end, or do you ever write the end and then kind of fill stuff in?
So sometimes I'll write the whole first draft, and then, as I said, I'll get to the ending and I don't like the ending. So then I'll go back and I'll tweak stuff and fill stuff in, but it's usually I'm editing anyway. So it's all part of my process.
Right. Yeah. Now, Sharon, do your books require research, and what are some of your favorite writing resources?
Okay, well, I definitely like going to the library, and especially the Toronto Reference Library. And this was a few years ago, because I needed this information for Beyond Faith. I needed because it was set in 1999, I needed to get some information from the criminal code in lay person's language for that time period, not now. So I found a book that was published in layperson's language in 1996 well, 1996 was when the last time the code at that point was done. So I started making notes, and I thought, oh, this is ridiculous. So I finally bought a secondhand one on Amazon for that. But my favorite place to go for research is talking to people, and that could be by email, it could be in person, or it could be on the phone. And my favorite ones to talk to are police officers, because sometimes funny things happen with that. And especially when you're going back to a different time period, things are different. But one of the funniest things that happened really was not in one of the novels. It was in a short story and didn't even have the same characters. But I wanted to use a garden trowel as murder weapon, but I wasn't sure if it would do the job, banging somebody on the head with it. And so I won't mention the fellow's name, but if he's here, he's probably going to be laughing anyway. But so I emailed him and I said, I don't know whether this will work or not. I figured he'd say yes or no and why. And no, he went out to Home Depot and I think it was Lowe's and looked at them. And then he sent me 2 photographs, and one he said, now this one won't work and why. And the other one, he said, yeah, this would do it. And I looked at it and I thought, oh my God, that's just like my garden trowel. But I only kill weeds. So this is the trowel like he said. And if you see anything there, it's dirt, it's not blood. I only kill weeds. So, you know, I mean, so funny things like that can happen. Or one more really quick one for the kidnapping in Beyond Blood. It was my first time I had a police officer, a retired one this time, helping, and we were discussing something I had written to do with kidnapping in the area of the law with that type of time. And we were sitting in a cafe, and I'm sure if anybody heard us talk, they would think we were plotting a kidnapping. So research can be fun, but you just have to make sure you don't suffer from researchitis, like overdo it.
Right, that makes sense. Now, Winona, how do you make murder fun?
Good question. I'm a great believer in not locking yourself into the terms drama, comedy, or tragedy. So you can have elements of all three in one piece of writing, the same way you can have them in episodic TV and in films. And I'm writing in the first person with my Jason stories. So although the overall feeling of the book might be on the lighter side when somebody dies, and they do invariably, it's seen through Jason's eyes. And he's a slightly reluctant amateur sleuth. He's also very perceptive and very sensitive, and he has life experiences. So the normal things that we experience, friends and family members dying, but witnessing a violent death or discovering the body of someone he's come to know well is always very unsettling and disturbing to him. So whenever it happens, I try to imagine what he's feeling, and I put it into human terms in the story. And it doesn't detract from the story, it just makes it more real in my eyes. I haven't experienced all that many deaths that were close to me in my own life. My best friend died in a fire when I was 19, and I always remember how I dealt with that at what was a relatively young age. My dad died when I was 30, quite a long time ago, and that gave me a different perspective again. But I'd never actually seen a dead person until my mom died last year. And that gave me an enormous insight into how Jason might handle the death of a person he's come to know in the course of the story. So he doesn't just pick himself up and carry on as if nothing had happened. It stays with him, and it influences how he thinks and how he acts in the rest of the book.
That makes sense.
Mhm.
Now, going to you, Ginger, you have 2 very successful series. How do you weave your clues and red herrings, or as you said, forget the red herrings, how do you weave all your clues into your mysteries so seamlessly?
Oh, thank you. I think that's probably partly because of the outlining. I will say, well, I don't want to just have her concentrate on this, suspect A, then suspect B, then, she goes back and forth from one to the other. I had something there. I had a brilliant thought and it's just gone. But it'll come back after this show is over. But I'll let you go on to something else.
Well, that makes sense though. If you have your outline.
Oh, I remember what it was. I will often bring in something really interesting to distract the reader from a really strong clue. So I don't know if that comes out as seamlessly or not, but of course people get used to my work, get used to how I do it, and so then they can guess who the bad guy is. But I changed that a little bit too.
Right. So it's like, oh, look at this over here, and the clue's kind of back behind.
Yeah. Just forget about what you just read and get
Right.
interested in this.
Right. I like that. That's good. Diane, is it hard to keep your books light when the theme is so dark?
I try not to let them get too dark. Like Mary Jane said in the last panel, cozies are about people like us. And life isn't all light and it isn't all dark. It's when we all seem to find the humor in the darkness. sometimes the darkness and the light, but you know, everybody seems to find a way to lighten up the darkness. And that's what helps me get my characters through all of these different situations, is they find kind of the weird funny, but you know, the dark humor sometimes, but then it turns into humor later.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Winona, how important is setting?
Well, I've always wanted to write about England. My development as a writer goes way back to the 1970s, when it definitely wasn't cool to write about Canada. And that's all changed now, but I have set one of my stories mostly in Peace River, Alberta, but I don't get the same buzz or thrill writing about Canada that I do when I write about England. And I'm sorry to admit that, but I was born in England and my relatives all live there, and I've been back many times. And I guess I just always wanted and yearned to have characters who were English. And it might have something to do with one of my past careers as a travel agent. I was always excited about booking trips abroad for my clients. And I guess I feel the same way about writing stories for my readers. I want to give them that same sense of adventure. And even though my setting is England, sometimes I make places up. Because I want the freedom to also make up what goes on there. So going way back to when I was writing my 3 time travel romances, I invented a village called Stoneford, which I put on the south coast of England between Southampton and Bournemouth. And that's where my 3 time travel novels were based. And I was really fond of that little village, and I felt like I wasn't really done with it. So I used it again in my 3rd Jason Davey novel, Lost Time. Jason's taken a leave of absence from his gig at the Blue Devil Club in London, and he's rehearsing to go on tour with his mum's band, Figus Green. And so I sent the entire band down to Stoneford to rehearse, and I put them into an old manor that actually belonged in the past to one of my characters in the time travel stories. And I had them stay at an inn that also featured in those stories. And I just felt I knew those places so well in my mind that it was incredibly easy to reimagine them for a completely different collection of characters, completely different genre, and they were there for a completely different reason.
That's really fun. I love that
Yeah.
you're bringing in different elements of your books into
Mhm.
into one another. That's got to be fun for your readers too, I'm
Mhm.
sure. Like, oh, I know this. place."
I'm toying with the idea of bringing some characters in too,
Oh,
having them
yeah.
meet.
Yeah, that's really fun.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? Oh, and I'm going to go upstairs right after this and tell my husband I need to go to Paris for a research trip. So I like your thinking.
It's tax deductible.
Yes. Okay, so how about, we're kind of getting, I think we have about 10 minutes left or something like that. So how about advice for writers just starting out? Anyone with some good advice?
I have some. I would suggest they not think they're going to write the best novel that's going to be published right off the bat, but they should read a lot. Definitely, you can't be a writer if you don't read, and especially read in the area you want to write in. Take a lot of writing workshops. Write, but also go and get your work critiqued. Join a writer's critique group. They're all over the place. I run one, the East End Writers Group, but they're all over the countries, all over, not just Canada, but the States and so on. And you can join them on Zoom, or we're going to soon be able to go back to them in person and get some feedback, because a writer has tunnel vision about their work. They'll think it's either bad or it's really good, and you miss things.
Right. What's that expression? Kill your darlings?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. And my editor has had me do at Blue Denim Press has had me do that with a few things. Kill your darlings.
Yeah.
Not the, something in there that just, no, this doesn't work. You got to get it out of there.
And I would add I agree with everything she said, and I would add, if you want to write crime fiction, whether you're male or female, join Sisters in Crime. And you could be a sister or a mister, and join the Guppies subgroup, the Great Unpublished Writers. And a lot of people in it are published. They just stick around. But that's where I learned the ropes of querying agents. And actually, I lived in New York at the time, so I actually met some of these people. It was really exciting. But join that group, and you will learn from those people. They'll help a lot.
Super. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people are in that. I think Judy Penn-Shaluk is one of them. The former
Sisters in Crime Canada West also, and CWC, though CWC is a crime writers organization. Sisters in Crime Canada West, same sort of thing. I don't think they provide the same kind of workshop experience or advice experience that you may be thinking of, but yeah, I all of my years before my formative years as a writer were all done with workshop situations. So I always had feedback from my peers, and it's so valuable to have that kind of thing. I was also going to say, for young writers coming up, be realistic. The publishing landscape has changed so much over the last decade. Don't assume that the only option available to you is by a traditional publisher. They're very interested in debut authors, it's true. But if you sent out your queries to agents and publishers and you haven't attracted their attention, it's not the end of the world. You can consider becoming an indie author instead. And if you go that route, find a good person who can act as your editor, your second pair of eyes, who can be honest and help you critically in a way that enables you to grow and learn as a writer, and be aware of all the pitfalls and the scams and the opportunities that are out there, quotation mark, because they really exist. A lot of them exist to extract a lot of money from you, and you never, ever make that back in sales. So
Right.
just have your eyes wide open.
Good advice.
Mhm.
We've got a couple questions here. The first one from Rose. How do you go about getting information on murder investigations for your amateur sleuth? So how do you go about well, like, I mean, Sharon mentioned, befriending a police officer or two. There's lots of Google research and all that sort of thing, right?
And there's this wonderful thing called the Writers Police Academy, that you spend, I forget, 3 or 4 days in immersive police activities and EMT activities. And it's being held in Wisconsin in the next couple of weeks. And it's really fun.
Hmm.
Also, I took Citizens Police Academy just in my own hometown too.
I did that too. I just graduated.
The OPP held this thing, and I went many weeks, and one lady said to me, "Oh," she said, "you look familiar. Were you in my over 80s driving class?" And no. Of course, I'm getting there now.
There's a lot of resources out there.
Lot of
If you ask questions, if you Google, if you join, I know Sisters in Crime out here has a whole collection of places where you can go. If you just ask them on their IO groups, if you say, I need some help, they'll point you in the right direction. That's the advantage of belonging to a group.
Right. Okay, another question here from Maya. Hi, Maya. How do you come up with unique murder methods or scenarios?
Oh, I try to kill people with donuts, and it's not easy.
Just, I guess, use your imagination.
Yeah, and in my Threadville series, I had a killer sewing machine. Yeah,
That's right.
literally.
I tried to kill Jason off with insulin at the end of Ticket to Ride. I'm not giving away a lot of spoilers here. And that was just basically inspired by me being diabetic and insulin dependent for a while. So I actually researched it and learned about the different kinds of insulin. Like, I'm on a slow acting one, I was, instead of a fast acting one. There's a lot of misconceptions about insulin out there. I tasted it. I wanted to see what it tastes like. And insulin has a smell. It's got a very distinctive smell. So that's why I used insulin in Ticket to Ride.
Right. Okay, great. So lots of different ideas for that. And Jane Burfield. Hi, Jane. I think she probably has the final questions of the night. Eric can let me know this, but anyway, Jane's question is, have you used a short story as a launch pad for a book?
Yep. I did for sure with Dead With It Remorse. It was actually started out as a short story, and it was a bridge between 2 of my books in my Gilda Wright Mysteries. And it actually appeared in an anthology with my former publisher. And then once I got the rights back to it, after everything went sideways, then I turned it into a book, and it's come out last year.
Great. It's a good idea to see, I guess, if people are enjoying the story and that sort of thing. So good thinking, Jane. And speaking of that, what is everybody working on now?
I'm working on number 8. You can see on my, I've got my 7 books there, and there's a space there for number 8. And also number 7, this is the first time I've shown the cover in public of Cinnamon Twisted. So that one's coming out. I just found out in at the end of next April. But I'm working on them, as I said, I'm working on the plotting of number 8.
Super.
I'm working on number 5 in my Jason series. It's called Bad Boy, and it follows Jason after he gets back from his band's tour of England. He's decompressing, getting used to not being on the road, and he's up visiting the Shard in London, and he gets involved in a case of some stolen music memorabilia. And he's hired to investigate it by a baddie I've brought back from a previous novel, Arthur Brasky, who was in G-String, and Jason's terrified of him. So that'll be interesting.
Super.
I'm writing my, working on the 3rd Beyond Mystery novel. That's like, there's a short story collection in there too somewhere. So, and it sort of picks up somewhere after the end of Beyond Faith, and Beyond Faith does sort of end on a cliff, you know, a cliffhanger. And so some of the cliffhangers, some of the stuff that wasn't resolved, we did find out who did this and who the bad guys were and everything, but there were still some things left hanging. And that is going to be continued. That's being continued on in Beyond Truth. But I'm also doing, like one of the other authors mentioned, about bringing in a character from another series at some point in the time I'd like to write, and I don't know when that's going to be, but and I have her as a trainee with the Attic Investigative Agency, which is what the 2 twins, Dana Bowman and her twin brother, fraternal twin Bast Overture, run. Their boss is Lawrence, and he was training her, and he suggested she should work with them. So she sort of lands in their place. So we've got her going on, but there's something, you know, suspicious about her, and Dana sort of picks it up, except she doesn't know what it is. And so I have a character dragged in from a future series, and I'm debating what I'm going to have happen to her in this one, because it may not be too cozy what I'm going to have happen, but I'm not going to kill her off. That's for sure. But, you know, so I've got that in, and things follow along in these series. Like David is still trying to recuperate from being kidnapped back in Beyond Blood. So we have that going on. They have the dog now, it belongs to them. So we've got Buddy in there. And Dana needs more people from her past, but her immediate past, like a police officer she didn't get along with, who is investigating a disappearance. So she has to deal with him.
Super. All right. Well,
Well, I was going to say my work in progress is actually book number 2 in my Sugarwood Mysteries, which is set in Ontario, fictional town, and it is called The Dead Man's Doll. And while the 2 of the main characters actually run a little craft shop, the shop a couple doors down is notorious for voodoo dolls and all kinds of witchcraft or witch doctoring kind of things. So they tend to get very involved in what's going on over there.
that sounds very interesting. Okay, well, that's great. So Eric, I think I was kind of getting into your territory here, so I sorry about that. I got a little excited, so I will pass it back to you. I'm not sure if I missed any questions or comments or anything that we should be addressing.
No, you did a great job, Lynn.
Thank you.
I'll read you one comment, and you did all touch on it already, but maybe you'd like to add to it a little bit. This is from J. Ivanel Johnson. She's saying that her writing keeps getting called cozies, but there's no baked goods, pets, fluffy Afghans, etc. And the main character is a detective, not an amateur sleuth, although she is helped by her elderly grandmother. She considers herself a sorry, I'm assuming it's a she. I apologize. They consider themselves to be simply traditional mysteries. So I know for you, Winona, you know, he's your main character is verging off amateur detective as he's doing his crime. So are there hard rules? Do you find hard rules between traditional and cozy? Do you ever get offended if somebody calls you a traditionalist? Or
I think those hard rules are written by agents and traditional publishers who use it as a marketing tool.
Yeah.
do you all have do you feel it mandatory to have a kitten or a dog on the cover?
No.
I
Yeah.
have to, because my Deputy Donut is the cat, and it's also the name of the donut shop. And Deputy Donut, the cat, plays. She's an important character in this story. But it's also she's also there because she's really cute and it helps sell books.
This was already asked, but I wanted to do sort of a little bit of a follow-up. When it comes to unique murder methods and scenarios, and Lynn, you can answer this one too. Obviously, you can't push the limit too much, right? So is there a place that you have to stop? Does it always have to be poison, or and you have to, I guess you have to find unique ways to kill off your victims, but at the same time, you can't leave it too gruesome or you're leaving the cozy genre.
I actually had a murder in one of my books, in actually the first Sugarwood book, and it was a poison, but it was how it was administered that was probably a little bit different than normal. It was actually in a vape.
Oh.
That took a little research, and my boyfriend is very scared, but
I think the thing with cozy is that it's usually it usually isn't a gun, you know, like it is like there is the things that you wouldn't normally associate as a murder weapon is pretty common for a murder weapon in a cozy. So
Yeah.
you know, whether it's the sewing machine or you know, or the stiletto heel or the, you know, the guitar maybe or whatever, but it usually isn't just, you know, a revolver, just, you know, it's
A boring gun.
yeah.
Yeah, or even a boring knife.
Mm.
Do you think there's a limit to how many people you can kill in a book if you're writing a cozy?
I
Some of the
hope
Agatha
not.
Christie's go a little far, and I don't know if you
Yeah.
consider her cozy, but like how many people is she gonna kill?
Jessica Fletcher has really gone. I wouldn't want to live in Cabot Cove.
I wouldn't
wouldn't-
want to live in Oxford.
Yeah. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
it's called the Cabot Cove syndrome.
And the more books you have in a series, the worse it gets.
Yeah, is there anybody still living in Cabot Cove? Is that Jessica Fletcher and the doctor and the sheriff?
But people, they keep moving in.
Yeah, and then she
But
went
they
to
have to-
York.
Yeah, that's right. There are new people moving in. They have to because they're running out of people
Yeah.
that are still alive and kicking. Yeah.
You also touched on this before too, but also the people you kill. So not how you kill them, but the people you kill. Does it always have to be the person that, they deserved it in a cozy?
Yeah.
Or can you make it an endearing character?
Yeah. Yeah, you can make, you know, you can make it some combination, but yeah, it could be somebody horrible or somebody nice, or, you know, in Survival of the Fritters, it's somebody lovable.
Yeah, well, in Beyond Blood, I have a very nice character get murdered because she sees something she shouldn't have. And so she gets murdered, and it's a teenager, the babysitter of David's babysitter.
Ooh,
So, but you know, some of them get their just desserts. Well, they get killed, but you know, some of the ones doing the killing, they get their just desserts at the end. But no, that's the one I can think of mostly in my books is the teenage babysitter.
Too, the idea, like some, you know, a lot of readers really like the idea of secrets. So maybe it was that really, really quiet, lovely lady down the street. But did you know, she did this and that and this when the lights were turned out? Like, you know, there's the idea of secret kind of, you know, can create a more interesting character. So it's not just a good person versus bad person.
Sorry, Sharon, you got called out on the chat. Somebody said, killing a babysitter doesn't sound like cozy. And I think even the title-
It
even
is
the
if she's
title of
eating
that novel-
donuts.
She would be munching on food because it was a party at a party.
Mhm.
Yeah, in cozies, traditional cozies, you don't harm children or animals. And children, by children, I mean right up through teens.
This one was 19.
Okay, there you go. It's okay.
Yeah, I guess I've seen it online. There's like 10 solid rules of cozy. One that I like from Vicky Delaney is that you don't stay on the tragedy. There's no real tragedy. It's almost like you can forget the murder. It's almost irrelevant. Enjoy the puzzle. Would you agree with that, or could there be tragedy in your stories?
I
Or
will
tragic
agree with
backstories?
anything Vicky says, I'll agree with.
Well, I'm looking at the questions. I'm sorry, Mike was talking to me and I'm not 100% sure Jane Burfield's question got asked. Did we talk about short stories as a launch pad for your book?
Mhm.
I thought you did. So I'm not gonna ask it again. So we're a little early, but if anybody has some questions, most people in the chat are already saying thank you. But we can squeeze in another question if anybody is quick.
Can Lynn tell us what she's working on next?
Mhm.
Oh, thanks, Ginger. I've just gotten myself an agent after many, many years of trying, so I'm pretty excited about that. So I am working on, so my book's on submission right now. A new one about a social media influencer who kind of draws on the knowledge of her followers to solve murders. So
Oh, cool.
we'll see if
Very
any
relevant.
picks that up. Yeah, I'm going for the millennial audience right now, so we'll see. Not
Super.
that the millennials are that young these days, but
Yeah.
so.
It still brings the average age of cozy readers way down.
Yeah.
Mike Martin squeezed in one question. He wants to know, what other cozy writers do you read? And to be fair, they don't have to be cozy writers. So if you're reading cozy writers, great. But if you're reading other writers, that'd be nice then too.
Well, Ginger brought up Vicky Delaney. I mean, I think in any cozy discussion, she's got to be brought up. She's a great writer with several series, all super.
Mary Jane Maffini also. And her book collector series just has me howling with laughter. Krista Davis, Lori Cass.
Mhm. Elizabeth Duncan, hers are really fun, set in Wales, the Penny Brannigan mysteries.
Rosemary McCracken, I like her books, her series. And I also like the American author J.A. Jance, who writes 3 series. And I don't know how she keeps up with it. She's been doing for years. I'm reading the Allie Reynolds one about one series now, but trying to do it in order, because if you skip or you miss something. So, but that's what I like to read. I also like to read Sarah Perez. I'm going to pronounce her last name wrong. Sarah Paretsky. And oh yeah, Vicky Delaney, of course, her, and I can't, Maureen Jennings, the list goes on and on. I'd be here forever if I.
I just did an interview, and I have the Stiletto Gang. I'm a member of a blog site, and I just interviewed Rose Kerr, and she has a new book out called Death on the Set, and it's a lot of fun too. So there's so many good books, so many good writers, really.
Yeah, I know. You'd have to lock yourself in a room for life to get through most of them.
I'd just like to plug, I haven't read her yet, but I'm going to have to, because she just won the Whodunit Award for Best Traditional Mystery, sponsored by the Jane Doe Award for Crime Writers of Canada, Candace Jane Dorsey's book, What's the Matter with Mary Jane? I'm going to have to be on my bookshelf too now. But watching the presentation, it sounds like it's going to be a fabulous book. Last question that we should always ask at the end: where can we find your books? Are you doing any in-store signings now that we're starting to do them yet?
I am. You can buy my books online. You can buy my books at Indigo in Vancouver. I'm doing some book signings there in June and July. Vancouver, Greater Vancouver.
My books are available on Amazon and Indigo, and also now that we are getting out into the real world, REAL, I have books at Indigo, the main one down in Toronto, and I'm also working, I haven't signed the contract yet, but I'm talking to them and they're interested in me doing, and as well as others too, because it would be one Saturday afternoon or one Sunday afternoon at one of the Kohl's stores. It's in a local mall, but they put the table outside the store in the mall, so you can catch people going by. And I'm also, this is a little plug for something that Crime Writers Canada are doing next weekend. And that's they're part of the Mystery Festival with the Authors Festival at Harborfront. And I'll be, along with a lot of other Crime Writers Canada authors, we will be there sitting at outside their tent to sell some of our books. So things are starting to look up. I personally prefer to sell a book in person because I can talk to the people.
Yeah, I think everybody's waiting to get signed copies again. It's cool you buy a book on Amazon, you can't get a signed copy that way.
No.
We already know some of this question. Winona, I believe you self-published already. But squeezing one question in because Rose got it right in the deadline. Have any of you self-published books, or have you considered self-publishing books? So there's already one nod, but what about the rest?
No, I work with a small publisher out of Airdrie, Alberta, BWL Publishing, and I've been with them for, oh my gosh, 11 years, something like that.
I really like the promotion and everything that a big publisher does. So I'm I'm much too lazy to self-publish. It's too much work.
It is a lot of work. It really is. I've been published traditionally and self-published, and I'm on the self-published track right now, the indie track, and I'm probably going to stay there. So.
Well, I've been published traditionally as well with a small publisher, Blue Denim Press. They're in Cobourg, Ontario, and they're very helpful with publicizing your book, especially with the COVID business and everything online with presentations. They were really very good with that. But I mean, they do expect the authors to do something too, and I can understand that. But no, I don't think I want to self-publish because, like you say, it's too much work, and I would rather concentrate on writing the book and polishing it up and then selling it, of course, helping to sell it. But the in-between period, saying somebody else can do that.
Just a quick question of for those of us not in Toronto. Somebody asked where Harborfront is. I'm assuming that's Toronto.
I can tell you where it is. It's down on the Lake Ontario. If you know where you go for the Blue Jays games and all the Raptors, the Scotia, whatever they call it now, it used to be Rogers Center. It's just south of there on the lake. So it's down, that's where it is.
Excellent. That's it, I think, from me and the audience. Lynn and everybody else, have a good night. And if you'd like to say a few final words, and again, if you have a book coming out or where people can find your books, good time to plug them.
This is my latest.
If I can,
Online, Amazon, Indigo, Vancouver.
yeah, anywhere books are sold. And you can always ask any bookseller
Yes.
or library to order your books.
You can.
Or to
Oh, yes,
order, if you want to buy a book, order it.
Yeah, libraries are a good thing. And you could get paid royalties for that. There's oh, I forget the name of it. It's the Canada Council that runs it, and it's under a different name. So if you check Canada Council, you can find out. You've just missed the getting your book in for the next year, but you can do it every year between, I think they start off in February and May the 1st. You've got till then to get it in, and then every February you'll get a royalty check based on how many books were read, I guess, and how many libraries you've got them in. But libraries are really good. You just need to contact them and get your book in. You have to be a little bit proactive in that, but they will take your books in.
It's
do a
called
survey.
Access copyright.
Yeah.
There's
Oh,
also
public-
access
public
copyright.
lending
No,
right.
that's another one. So there's really two.
Yeah,
Access
public
copyright,
lending
they pay you in
right.
the fall. They pay you in the fall. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very good advice, Sharon. it's been my experience that librarians tend to love cozies. So help out your cozy authors and ask if librarians.
Well, readers love them, so it follows.
Excellent. That's it for me. You can say your goodbyes and we'll see everyone
Bye.
tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Guys, thank you, Eric, for introducing us.
Yeah,
And
thank
thank you
you.
guys. You guys were a great panel. And thanks for everybody for coming out and listening to these wonderful authors tonight. So it was a lot of fun.
Thank you for all the other authors, for meeting you, and Lynn, we've seen each other before, we've run
Yes.
into each other, but thank you for moderating the panel and keeping us on track.
Happy to. Lots of fun.
Yeah,
Thank you
thanks.
for everyone coming.
Good night, guys.
Good night.
Good night.
And have a good sleep. And I'm sure everybody knows what's happening tomorrow morning. The exact opposite of cozies. Meeting for Ian Rankin. Good night.
Okay.
Good night.